Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Allison Durant and I'm here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I had recorded a video on here a couple days ago, and instead of hitting zoom out just before I was about to start my project, I hit the off button, and that's the second time that this has happened to me. And I was just about to dive into affordable mini works on this cardstock paper, which I had purchased off of Amazon. So I can link these cute little cards. One side is glossy, the other side is actually quite good for watercolor. It's good in the sense if you don't have the time to be cutting out 140-pound watercolor paper, which is ideal in my mind for this kind of project. It's just a nice way to have some pre-cut cards. So these, I think they came in a box of 200, and they're just another option for creating the little mini works that I had shown in my last video before I turned you all off. And I see my son has been helping me get organized. He keeps his crayons in this little tin. These are really small tins. I had purchased these on Amazon as well. And I wanted to talk about affordable mini art on paper, specifically, water-soluble materials. Watercolor is sort of my go-to relaxation. I love doing watercolor, and it can be a very affordable sort of form of art therapy, and working on these minis has been so much fun. So what I would recommend is getting a really affordable watercolor set. So this particular set I had purchased here, I thought it was at the Dollarama, but I think I got it at Michael's here in Canada. And you kind of have to look around because you would think maybe it would be cheaper at, say, the dollar store, but if you can get a coupon, say at Michael's, it could just work out to be more affordable. Also check out places like Staples. I know Staples here in Canada, I had purchased my favorite style of watercolor brush is a round brush. And these are, I had purchased these at Staples because it was more affordable than Michael's or the dollar store. It can be really hard to find these very affordable round Crayola watercolor brushes. So I'm just gonna break open this set of 4. And so there's 4 different sizes, which is awesome. And I really like to use these brushes because they're a synthetic brush that I find has worked quite well for doing art with my son, who's a preschooler. And so I'm not too worried about the brushes, kind of when they're used in a way that's not so gentle. These brushes are quite wonderful. So I really love the round brushes, but use whatever you have. A lot of watercolor sets come with brushes. They're not always the best brushes. So these are a couple well-loved sets that we have here. And you can see this was the Crayola set, and I prefer not to go with something that is kind of like disposable plastic. There's quite a bit of plastic packaging with these. I do like the pigments though, considering they're washable, non-toxic, very affordable. And the only thing you can do is you can refill these little slots. Once all the watercolor has been used, you can refill it with watercolor paint and it will dry. So if you for instance, so I use a lot of watercolor. This happens to be a much more expensive tube watercolor from Daniel Smith, and I could just take off the lid, squeeze out this watercolor paint into this palette and just reuse this palette. And so it would last probably a little while, but instead of just, recycling it, that's an option. The other thing you can do is just use this as sort of a palette while you're working, an empty palette, just to mix colors and, get that watercolor and the pigment in the water down into kind of like a little reservoir. So these I just recommend any watercolor set that you can afford, because I firmly believe if you have good quality watercolor paper, so good quality watercolor paper, I look at the weight of the paper. So an example, I'm just gonna see if I have it nearby here. Where is my watercolor paper? I usually have everything really close by. I'll just use this. These are really small. These are more expensive papers, so I will link some very affordable. Let me just see, I must have them here. Okay, so the key is, here we go. This is an example of watercolor paper that I use. You can see for some acrylic swatching, and I did some stenciling with some non-toxic food dyes here. This is sort of like an art journal I was just playing around in, doing some mark making. And I will go back to use these pages maybe for collage. But if you are looking for sort of an affordable watercolor paper and you want to watch your budget, I find this to be a really good brand. So this is a brand called Canson, and this is mixed media paper. So sometimes it says watercolor here, sometimes mixed media. Really, it doesn't matter as long as you can tell that, you know, it can hold watercolor, which it says down at the bottom. It's 98 pounds or 160 grams. So I just look at how many pounds, and anything over 90 I would use for my watercolor work. Ideally, 140 pounds is my go-to. I really love working on 140 pound paper, even if it's cheaper watercolors. So Canson also has the 140 pound, if you can afford that. There's also sort of, there's brands at Michael's in-house brand is called Artist Loft, and that's a good one too, 98 pounds or 140 pounds. So getting decent quality paper, I'd say I would recommend, and then going cheaper with the watercolors, because the paints will go on so much nicer. And we'll just do like a little practice here quickly, and you won't get that buckling and kind of tearing, and you'll be able to flatten your page. So I'm just going to move these sets. The other thing I wanted to say about these sets that come in the hard plastic, you can also use this as a little palette. So I'm just going to take that paint, and you know, these paints again are more expensive. You can get very affordable watercolor paints in tubes, and I'm just going to squeeze it out. I thought I'd get a lot more out. And what I would do, I would try and get as much out as I can. Some artists have unrolled it and cut the other end and squeezed it out. So I'll do that off camera, but it is quite amazing how much paint comes out of these little tubes. So you can reuse these palettes. So just not to, you know, not to think of this as something you're just going to toss out afterwards. It's really wonderful to use these to hold, you know, even acrylic paints, or you know, something that you can kind of get off of after if needed. And so we'll just put these aside. And so I'm just gonna do a little demonstration here on my larger 98 pound Canson mixed media paper. This is 7 inches by 10 inches. So I have my water, I have my watercolors here, which I'm going to open and activate. So this is a set of 24. You can see the colors are really vibrant, and it surprised me when I was using this for the first time, because again, it's very affordable. But when you use good quality paper, you are set. And not only do I love using these watercolor brushes with my son for myself, this is one that you can see is very well loved. I use this round affordable synthetic brush. This is probably about a size 12 or a 14. They come in different sizes. I tend to paint with a large round brush, a size 12. And this would be an example of a higher quality watercolor brush, but I love these because I use a lot of acrylic inks. So acrylic inks are like an acrylic paint, but they are fluid, they are permanent, they are highly pigmented. I believe they're permanent. They should be permanent. Someone told me that they might not be. And when I'm embellishing my canvas prints or when I'm painting, I use these brushes when I use the Liquitex acrylic inks. There's also different brands. I tend to like the Liquitex. There's Daler Rowney, and I think Michaels has their own in-house brand of acrylic ink. I just want you to know not to use your more expensive watercolor brushes because they'll be ruined. The other thing I use this brush for is my favorite alcohol ink, which I use to embellish my canvas prints, by Jacquard. And this is just, the base is an alcohol base. And so I use this brush for this particular process. So just a heads up on that if you are working with something like paints that are a little bit more harsh for your brushes, these are a wonderful option. And they've lasted me a really long time. So I'm just gonna go with a couple of my brush sizes here. I have my paper. I have activated my watercolors just so they're easier to get into. And I'll show you what the 98-pound paper looks like when you're using these more affordable Crayola paints. So I'm just gonna dip into this lighter kind of pink. It's just beautiful. I'm gonna go straight into the red, like an analogous color, and just put that up here. I'm gonna dip into maybe the orange, let them blend. And I'm going to then maybe I'll go into a different color. I'm gonna grab my little paper, which I clean my brush off as to not put it back in the water. And I use this little paper for collage or different things when I'm done, when it's dry. And then my water doesn't get as dirty. Then I'm gonna go into this beautiful purpley color. I'm just gonna maybe drag it up. And then go into the next and just kind of drop it in. And I know, because I'm used to working with higher quality watercolors, this is not, you know, it's not wonderful, but it's really, really great considering, you know, again, it's what you're comparing it to. So I think these are highly pigmented, wonderful watercolors if you're just wanting to experiment, see if you like watercolor and just play. You can see I kind of spritz to get the watercolor moving on the page, but the color is really vibrant. And for the purpose as to, you know, doing these little mini cards, I'll just see if I have an example of when I had done, just when my video had turned off, I think. I can't remember if I had done this on video, but these are those little art cards, which I'm gonna link. And they're from Amazon, those 200 pre-cut art cards. One side's glossy, paint with these watercolors on the other side, but these are the Crayola watercolors with the Crayola brushes. So they're a wonderful, highly pigmented, beautiful base, and then you can do mark making over top. So I am going to go in with maybe a slightly darker color. I really like Payne's Gray. This looks like a dark bluish purple. I'm just gonna drop it in different areas just to add contrast to my work. And when this 98-pound paper fully dries, you can tear it out of the book and flatten it. So that's a nice option to have if you really like what you've done, or if, you know, if it's your kids' art and they want to glue it into a more permanent book, or if you want to frame it, you can flatten it. So I'm getting a lot of bubbles, which is interesting. And to be honest, I cannot figure out why I have more bubbles than usual. I think it's probably, I don't know actually, because I did this not that long ago and I didn't get the bubbles. So it might be just putting too much water in and moving too quickly. I'm putting in that green, letting it run. And I'm just basically choosing colors that I'm craving in the moment. Isn't that blue just fabulous? I'm gonna add a little bit of a darker blue, maybe let it run into the red, and maybe add a little bit of the blue into the purple here. That's an interesting kind of mark that I was getting. So this can be just our little warm up on a larger sheet. And I'm really liking the way this is turning out. All I'm doing is when I'm finished putting the paint down on this page, I'm just using this as kind of my sort of like rag sheet. And this will be a fabulous background for later. I like to add neutrals next to the brights in my work. So, you know, maybe just adding some gray in here, maybe over here, maybe dragging it down here. And this looks like a really cool, dreamy landscape, and I can't wait to go back over top of it with mark making. If I don't love it, the good thing is I can cut it up. I can paint with acrylic paint over top. So many options. So I'm just going to set that aside to let it dry. And just going to move those over. So when I first started, a lot of you that have been following me know that I had published an art poetry deck, sort of like an oracle deck. But the prep for that, I'm just trying to see if I want to, oh yeah, okay. There's just a few things I wanted to show you, and I'm just seeing if I have them handy. I get so much out. Oh, here they are. So initially, when I was designing my own oracle deck, I thought what would be really great to have pre-cut cards in the size of a blank tarot card. So I had purchased these on Amazon as well, probably a year ago, and they're by a company called I'm a Game, and I can link this. The only thing is, I saw this size, I thought this is wonderful. I really liked, this is an example of the back of the card. Both sides are quite glossy, whereas they were supposed to be one side glossy and the other side more like a cardstock. But I found both of them to be really glossy. So the way I ended up using them was I had used acrylic paints, acrylic inks instead of watercolor. So I'm not going to get into this technique today, but I did want to just show you that these were available. If you want to paint with acrylics, they're a really great size. I was doing some jelly plate printing, some mono prints on here, just really trying to get interesting textures. So this is all acrylic paint on these glossy cards. So I love these sizes of cards, and I can't wait to kind of finish these and make decks, make one for my son, maybe one for my mom for Valentine's Day. Although I love watercolors, so these weren't ideal. So I just wanted to show you, these are an option if you want to have a pre-cut card and use acrylic paints or acrylic inks, or collage. So this is an example of, I thought, well, I ordered all these cards. What am I going to do on them? And my printer, when I was working on creating my cards of all of my original art that went into print for a deck, this one, I did not publish this one just because I felt like the artwork didn't quite fit. But this one was a piece of, it was like a sticker that I had put on this tarot card. This is made of wallpaper actually, so just a really unique way of getting your art onto, instead of a cotton rag or a fine art print, this was wallpaper that had gone into a very high quality printer, and my printer, who's here locally, had made these stickers for me when I was trying to figure out, you know, what art do I want in my deck. This was originally the artwork that I was going to use, which if you have seen my deck, you know that, where is it? Oh, here it is. This is what it ended up looking like. And this has a bit of paint on it. It's very well loved. But when I was designing the deck, I had all of the art and sort of what I had used in my online kind of design program. I had it printed on, this is wallpaper sticker. So I had used this card. So if you have stickers or if you want to do collage, these are a really high quality glossy card that is great for stickers. So I had put my, I'm just going to line it up properly. Sometimes I feel like I have to rush through my videos, but you all have reassured me that I don't need to and that you just don't mind when the videos are relaxing and a little bit slower. So that really helps me. So I'm just putting this sticker on, and what I'll do is I'll let's see if these left-handed kid scissors work for me. But you know, you can grab a glue stick, you can grab some papers that you might have laying around, old magazines, you know, thrift store book pages. You can glue them on to these pre-cut cardstock cards. Whoops, I'm cutting into the card a little bit, but that's okay. And then I'll round the corners. It's just another way to work on something small like a deck of cards. Now, I did really like, again, the size of these. It was just a matter of not being able to use them with the materials that I like to do art with. Again, my videos, I need somebody to keep me on track because I get so excited. I just share, I go way, way, way off track. But I wanted to show you these little stickers. And this was a way of me going through all of the artwork that I thought about putting into my art poetry deck. I ended up changing the symbol. There is that piece of art that I had titled Quiet, and I had the words Practice Stillness, and that ended up being that art that I had used on each of my cards. Where is it? So I had chose this painting to publish on all of these cards. I'm gonna put them back in this little tuck box. Okay, so that's kind of like where my thinking was going when I started to create small. Initially I thought, well, I'm creating this small oracle deck, I need all of my art to be small, and I started to just paint really small. And then I realized that's not the case, because if you have a good printer and you get your work into print, you know, this piece I'm looking at right now on my wall, I'll see if I can show you without turning off the video. Let's see if I can do this. Whoops. Okay, bear with me. It's really hard to see. But can you see the art up on the wall there? That is at least, it's too bad the reflection is going on right now, but that is one of the cards. It didn't make the cut for the art deck, but you can just see, you can take a larger piece of art and put it into print. Okay, let's see. I got a new tripod. I'm just gonna see if I can put it back. I think that looks really good right there. Okay, thank goodness I didn't turn you all off. Oh, okay, so let's just get back on track. Thank goodness you can forward through or like skip to certain points in these videos, and you can really hone in on what you want to what you want to take from them. So these cards, again, come in a box of 200 from Amazon, and you can probably find them in many other places. You can also make your own, which I highly, highly recommend. I just was a bit short on time, and I chose to go with this product and see if I liked it. And then that way I could share whether or not it was any good with you all. And I'm just gonna make sure. So these are some of the cards that I've already done. Again, this glossy side, I haven't figured out what I want to do with it yet. And I just had been playing around with both watercolor, acrylic, and mixed media on top of these cards. When I was taking a course, I was experimenting with different mark making I liked. I was using some different styles of pens, water-soluble materials, gouache, acrylic. I really like this one, and it's interesting how some of the really shimmery watercolor has come off, but I actually like the way it has come off. It's left sort of a very interesting look. So these are like little mini studies, you know, maybe I'll look at this and say, I really want to buy a larger canvas or a piece of paper and use this palette. Or I really like how, you know, this turquoise, how I got this texture. You could always put notes on how you did something on the back. These little cards, the possibilities are endless. And I had done a little mind map actually this morning because I was so excited. I wanted to get all my thoughts down. And I just will run through really quickly my ideas, and you'll have your own ideas. But these cards, I love the idea of using these as affirmation cards. So, you know, a word maybe that is an intention for, say, the day, the month, the year, you know, maybe a goal, maybe just one word that is meaningful to you. I had recently, where was it? Yesterday, I had made a card. I cannot find it, but I had put, instead of, with my art poetry paintings, I like to use words, and I often write, "There are brighter days ahead" with my art, or "In every moment I carry you with me." Sometimes I write the words with gratitude. But yesterday, and actually this past week, has been so cold. And one of my clients that had purchased my painting that said "Brighter Days Ahead" said, "I really think this should say warmer days ahead." And I had a bit of a laugh. But then that evening I had pulled out this blank card and I had written, oh, here it is. I had written on it, "There are warmer days ahead," because I just needed to see this. I want to put this in a frame on my fridge and just keep this where I can see it. This texture I had somehow achieved. I don't remember because I didn't put notes on the back, but I liked this texture and it reminded me of like ice and snow and frost. And this, I'll probably go back and add some mixed media elements to this and sort of finish it like a little piece of art. But this is an example of one of those cards, these blank tarot cards, that says durable cardstock, but was very glossy on both sides. So on this one side, again, it's acrylic, so plastic paint, basically. And on this side, so those sheets that I was just kind of cleaning my brushes on, this is 90 pound paper. So when I'm cleaning my brush, I work on this, and then I cut it up, and I had glued it on the back of that glossy card. So I love that this is, in a sense, breaking a blank page. So instead of just looking at this blank card, I had reused this page, and it's given me something to explore. So I love to use these cards as mini studies as well, you know, and maybe I'd love to make one every day of the year, 365 little studies, and then the next year flipping through and just seeing the difference, you know, or even once a month, right? Having, say, 12 cards and just some ideas, maybe artist prompts. So I'm gonna just put that where I can see it today. It's actually warmer today. I think the wind chill is only -31. So, okay, back to Okay, I've got to focus. The other thing I was thinking of with Valentine's Day coming, writing on these little cards what you love about the person and just having that watercolor background. And you can get those punch outs. You know, these punch outs are available at craft stores. But again, if you just don't have the time, or you wanted some really specifically pre-cut cards that you can afford, I had cut up a whole bunch of old paintings initially when I was starting to consider what kind of a deck do I want to create. But I love these because I can go back and use, you know, I can cut them out in a shape, maybe a heart, or get those punch out. This is just an example of the one I used for these little tags. I wish it was bigger. So this I had purchased at Michael's quite a number of years ago. And I think it is a good size for a tag, but you know, I had purchased these little tins. They're a bit small. So I'm just kind of giving you ideas, hopefully. Just that is what my videos are all about, is just trying to inspire you with using what you have. I was thinking of doing a card theme. I know my son really wants one with dinosaurs and ocean life. So wouldn't that be neat, just to create, you know, a different fish on each one, or you know, a dinosaur. Will, you know, and we can always do collage with royalty-free images. That's another thing you can do. You can also explore your own art style. So this one I had done with the Crayola paints. This is my traditional art poetry style. I tend to have my composition, I try to keep it varied, but this is sort of, I leave a lot of white space and I kind of work my way up the side, and then I want to do mark making over top. But you know, if I do cards in what I feel like is my style, I can see my style evolve as I kind of, you know, create some cards, like I said, just a few each month, and then kind of seeing the progression every month, or just knowing that these are just little studies and you may want to go back and use them. You know, hey, I haven't done a landscape, but this reminds me of, you know, some hills, and I love that green. I don't use that green in my work. So just exploration. These are little studies that you can always take to a bigger level. If you don't love them as much, you know, you can write a really lovely phrase or word, and you can say, drop them off at a senior's lodge, you know, for everybody in the lodge to have a card, putting them in a little mini library. I like to do that in the neighborhood here, just dropping little pieces of art. You can also consider doing artist trading cards of smaller sizes. You can do, again, gift tags, collage, you know, who is the artist that's inspiring you in the moment and why, and maybe doing some mark making that reminds you of the piece that you like. And I like the idea of artist prompts. I'm not going to go through, I have such a huge list here, but so many possibilities. And so because these are small cards, I'm going to use my small round brushes instead of the larger brush. And we're basically going to be creating some backgrounds and then going back and doing mixed media elements over top. It's just making sure you guys are still with me here. Oh my gosh, this is, so my printer had given me the smallest little canvas ever for Christmas. This is so cute. My son had put it in this tin and had kept it in his room. And but this was my cat Milo, and I was so surprised that it fits nicely in this little tin. The other thing, I want to show you was stickers. We've been putting stickers in these tins. So my son's little bug stickers, floral stickers, gift tags, artist trading cards. So there's different tins. These ones are the ones I talked about in the prior video with the little window. They're slightly bigger than the tins that I am showing you for the cards I'm doing today. Oh, and I want to mention that the cards that I'd ordered from Amazon in the tins, they just don't quite fit without a trim. And so you're gonna have to just trim the edges. I had purchased a little, where is it? I have a little corner. Oh, here it is. I can round the corners with this device, but you know, you can just trim it with scissors as well. I just find that these trim really nicely at the 10 millimeter mark on this little punch. and then they fit well without having to trim too much. So it's almost like Amazon knew that, so you'd have to buy more. So let's just get started. We have these optional tins, but you could always see what you have around the house. They used to have mints, Altoid mints, I believe. You know, watercolors come in these tins. You could use a paper bag, you could use a photo album, you could use a basket. So just thinking of, you know, even a basic little box that may have come in the mail, or you purchased something small. It doesn't have to be a purchased tin. With purchasing these kind of tins, you often need to buy bulk. So you'll want to avoid that if you're trying to keep your costs down. So maybe making your own cards. And again, this watercolor paint is wonderful with the round Crayola brushes. So what I do is these ones are all ready to have marks, so we'll just set those aside for a second. I also want to show you this little magnet holder, which I got at Michael's. You can get these at so many places, but when you have a finished card that you really like, you can find the right size and slip it in, and you know, maybe it would have your intention of the month and putting it on the fridge, or leaving like a little note for your partner or something. So just some ideas. So we'll put out, I like to work on multiple at a time, and then we'll let them dry. So I work fairly quickly. I'm going to activate the watercolors again. And again, this is my Crayola set of non-toxic washable. There's 24 watercolors in here. And the first one I'm going to do, I'm going to dip into this purple and just go across as though I'm creating kind of like a little landscape. And that wasn't as dark as I'd like. I'm just gonna dip right into this color and let the colors mix, which I love to do. I'm not too particular about colors mixing, and I'm not going right to the edge, and I'll show you how I like to do my edges after, but you may wish to go right to the edge. This is all just about play, right, and exploration. And I'm just putting this color on multiple pages here. This one I'll use more water. And then I'm just gonna clean my brush, and then I'm gonna go into maybe, so purple and yellow are complementary colors, so they look nice together. But if you run them into each other, they will create a neutral. So I'm just gonna create a little bit of mud up here with that yellow. Maybe put a little bit over here. And I really am craving something bright. Just gonna add that bright up there and just let this do its job. Gonna add some yellow over here. And I'm not judging what I'm doing. If I was to judge this now, I wouldn't be really that content with what it looks like. But I know, I'm confident that I can make it look awesome, just because you can easily paint over, you can adjust your marks, you can add to it, you can, you know, glue paper over it if you don't like it. This is all about sort of enjoying the process of the doing and experimenting. So I'm not really, oh, I love that color. Just not thinking too much about what I'm doing, except getting color down fairly quickly. I love that color in there. So I'm gonna do that on all of these little pages. And I could always explore a different size brush. I'm quite happy with this brush right now. And maybe I want to add in, I love lime green. Just trying to decide where I want to add it in. Maybe I'll add just a little bit up there. And it wasn't that pigmented, which is okay. I'm just going to add in that other one and maybe a little bit of that. I don't love that when I see that I put it in there, so I am not going to repeat it. Maybe I'll mix that in and use a little bit more of the lighter. And again, I can kind of go over that after if I don't want that green in there. But I'm just, again, playing and figuring out what I like, what I don't like. I really like that purple there. It's really pretty. I like seeing the brush marks like right here. Maybe I'll just go with a straight line through here. Maybe I'll use, and I use a lot of pigment, as you can see. So the less pigment and the more water you use, the more transparent look you'll get. So as an example, I have a lot of this purpley pink here on my brush. I'm just gonna actually spray water on my card and just watch it move around. And so you're creating this beautiful background of that color. And I might just leave it at that. Or, you know, I could drop another color in. What I mean by that is, just clean my brush. Maybe I'll just see how the white is. So I'm gonna dip into the white and maybe see if I can drop it in as little snowflakes almost. And just, we'll see how that dries and if that works. Hard to see, but we'll just try it out. If you have affordable acrylic paints on hand, you could drop in acrylic paint and just explore what that's like. And I'm gonna let these dry. This one I can drip without smudging it. I really like, whoops, some of the texture that I'm getting where the granules are there. So I'm just gonna drip it down. Maybe I'll use my paper towel since you guys are on video and I'm gonna be using my table again. So I've just dripped that down. That was sort of experimental. I'm gonna let that dry. I think I am gonna let this one drip down. Just gonna kind of curve it a bit and see if it will drip twice. Nope, just once. I really like that. I almost think of rooting myself when I'm doing these drips. I'm just gonna see if I can get that one to drip down the side. We'll set that up here. And this one I'm gonna leave it alone. I'm kind of stuck with a color palette, so I'll just see with this one, I'll just add in maybe some different colors. I'm gonna dip into this dark purplish blue here, almost creating like a little landscape. You can layer watercolors, which is neat. You know, just playing around with different mark making. I'm kind of trying to do some hills with, you know, pushing down and curving my brush. Going over the red. And I'm craving some of that yellow in there. Whoops, and I kind of muddied up the yellow, and that's okay. It's just sort of more of a neutral yellow, which I can go in with a brighter yellow after. But really what we're doing is just creating these bases to work off of when we use mark making supplies. So after everything is dry, I don't use a hair dryer or a heat gun. Sometimes artists do that. What I'm gonna do is I'll just leave these up here to dry. I can probably go back to them, you know, ideally let them fully dry for several hours. It depends on what climate you're in, but I tend to let them dry naturally because the watercolor blooms really beautifully if you kind of set them aside and don't heat them too much. So we'll let those dry, and then I'm gonna go back to my other ones, which are, start to lose track of Where am I? Oh, there they are. What I have going on here. So again, we can use some mark making over these ones. These ones I had done with Crayola, and these ones I had done with just watercolors I had on hand. I wanted to show you last night how I got the texture in this particular one. So I was painting and using my watercolor palette. I'm looking for where that is. Oh, there it is, over there. And I had put quite a bit of paint down up here, and I thought I really just I don't want to let all of it dry and kind of take over the rest of the colors. And so what I did is I grabbed my cardstock on the watercolor, you know, the less smooth side, and I put it down, and I held it at the side, and I went like this, just so it had time to absorb a little bit, and then I pulled it off straight, and I got this really interesting, you can see the metallics that were picked up here, and you can see just some of the darker pinks, and it was kind of neat the way I did 2 pulls, and I just thought that's a really neat way to break a blank page and also break cabin fever, is just how quick was it to just use up some of that paint on here and create these bases, which I'm going to go back to. So I really just wanted to share how easy it is to get paint down, and then, you know, kind of feel like you can pull it together and experiment afterwards. And so one phrase that I really like, just seeing where I can find. So you probably have a lot of very affordable art supplies sitting around and may not know it. You may not, but just trying to think outside the box. I'm just gonna move this so I don't smudge it on my arm. I was just trying to think of, what do a lot of people have on hand? I have some HB pencils. This was a permanent studio gel pen I purchased at the dollar store, the Dollarama here in Canada. They come in packs of 12, and they're so affordable. Something like, I don't know, 15 cents each, or it's probably gone up, but they're just a really wonderful permanent pen, and I find they last a long time. So I like these as my staples if I was looking for affordable supplies. I also have a lot of crayons that of course I would have. So I probably would use the black quite a bit. I use a lot of black and white in my mark making. I also had, this is called a Stabilo Woody. Now these are a more expensive art supply. However, they are really, really wonderful and last for such a long time. So these Stabilo Woodies, this is an example of, these are, my son had got these for Christmas. So this has, it's two-toned, which is kind of cool. They are watercolor, they are non-toxic, they use, where is it, like something about sustainable wood. They are a beautiful, beautiful watercolor mixed media crayon, and I use these all the time. And I know a lot of professional artists, or artists that, you know, I shouldn't say professional, but artists that are selling their work. I know Betty Krause uses these a lot in her work. She's a wonderful mixed media artist, and they sharpen up really nicely. So you get a sharpener that comes with them. So my son and I love these. I love these because for dexterity purposes, I'm just going to sharpen this one. They're really, really great. So that is something that I'd say if you have a desire to get a really high quality, almost like a watercolor in a stick that also provides mark making, it's pretty amazing. So I'll just introduce you to that supply here. So I like to use white, a good white, you know, even a good white pen that you could get affordably, that's helpful for mark making, or your favorite color. Again, a permanent pen is great. Crayons are great. Anything water soluble crayons. These are some pastels. They're a bit messy, but Crayola makes really great kids pastels. You can use those for mark making. And thinking outside the box, like I love, let's just see if we can pull these aside. Oh, I know. I was going to talk about washi tape. Really affordable acrylic paints. This is DecoArt Americana. I had purchased Oops paint for $1 Canadian at Home Depot. I tried to get the lid off today and I couldn't, so I'm gonna not be demonstrating with this one, but house paint. If companies make a mistake at the hardware store, paint store, Home Depot, Lowe's, they will sometimes allow people to buy discounted paint. So this is really, really great paint. I find if you get a high quality white paint, you can go with mixing it with cheaper paints and making them feel and look higher quality. So again, if you're on a budget, mixing a really high quality white paint with, paying a little bit more if you can't find white. Even this company, DecoArt and Americana, a white paint, very affordable, just a couple dollars for the tube. These were about $2.75 Canadian. And again, you can mix them and tint them. So adding white will make them lighter. You're tinting it, but it will make it a higher quality paint. So just a little trick there. And also highlighters. I love neons in my work and just play. So these little art cards are just, again, for exploration, but seeing what does it look like adding neon in certain areas. Like I love that. I love how adding the highlighter over the purple has changed that color and made it more neutral. And just, grabbing this side maybe and adding some neon on the side. And just thinking about what art supplies do you have on hand that are sitting around. I don't use highlighters as much anymore because I haven't been in school or really studying anything for a long time. So, these highlighters, they probably over time do dry out. So just considering highlighters. And I really like adding, so just do a couple of these just to show you. So I like to look at areas where I can add more contrast. So I am going to use this, my child's Crayola crayon, and I'm going to do some black mark making. Just these little dash marks and just going over top of the watercolor and seeing how well it works. They are pretty good. I'm used to, again, higher quality art supplies, but to do these with your kids, or if you're on a budget, maybe you're traveling and you didn't bring any of your art supplies with you, that is just a really great way to get mark making down. And, maybe considering turning this into like a flower. Whoa! Oh, and in Calgary, it's really dry. So with both wax and high quality crayons, like those Neo crayons, Neo Color Caran d'Ache, I break them all the time. But this is just an example of creating, enjoying the process. If it doesn't turn out, it's not a big deal. I didn't like that after I did it, so I could always add white paint over. I just don't like the stem, but again, it's just all about exploration. I'll show you this white Stabilo Woody. I'll also show you, these are just the most wonderful watercolors. So this one is kind of neat because if you roll it, you can get different, so I'm pushing down fairly hard. You can get the turquoise on the one side and then the blue on the other. Maybe adding in a little bit of this solid green. Also down here, maybe adding in this turquoise color in here. You can kind of leave it at that, or because these are water soluble, you can wet them. I really like kind of just playing with the line work and wetting along the lines. And so you can buy water-soluble pencil crayons or crayons really affordably as well at many stores. Again, the dollar store, your local craft store. Looking at what's in the kids' supply section, sometimes it's more affordable. And this is such a cool background, and it was so fast, and you could just write a word across. You could, you know, there's so many things you could do with it. I'm gonna let that one dry and then go back to this white crayon. So maybe you want to add, trying to think of like maybe just some white circles. This one doesn't come out quite as well as I'd hoped for video. So we'll look at maybe a different color. I know what I could show you. So again, anything water soluble. These are Artist Loft, super, super affordable watercolor crayons. And I love to finish my work with these. So I just want to show you. You can also do, before I move on to that, you can do mark making with a pencil. Again, Betty Krause, who I love. She's a worldwide selling artist, lovely person. She uses pencil in a lot of her work as mark making and underlayers. And right now I'm learning that the pencil, for some reason, did better over this part of the watercolor than up here. So I got way more of a shimmer with the lead, and I really like that. You can use, again, like a permanent ballpoint pen. And I'm just gonna write along here with gratitude. And I can see some of the watercolor coming up, but I don't care. I'm gonna grab a water-soluble, this orange I really like, and I'm just gonna put some right up here. I love playing with these. My son and I use these all the time. So any water-soluble crayon will do. I love this pink. It's almost like a neon pink. So these are from Canada, from Michael's Canada. And they're just in-house water-soluble crayon, which is super affordable. You can see this little tin is from a puzzle set that, well, the puzzle is probably in little plastic bags, which isn't ideal, but I found this empty box and I was like, hey, this is a good spot for my watercolor, water-soluble crayons. And I'm just smudging some of it with my finger. Again, it should be non-toxic. You can use like a little sponge. I might add maybe this darker color over top in here. I like that. And I'm just playing. I'm not overthinking it. I am going to maybe add a lighter purple just in this area here. And this card is so much fun. It's a little bit sticky because we're using water-soluble crayons that we haven't activated with water. We're just kind of scrubbing them on. So just a heads up on that. What I had done with some of my little cards is I had used these same supplies, and what I had done was put plastic tape over top and cut around it. And that way I didn't get my hands dirty, and it's not ideal, but if you want to, you know, if you're not going to put these in like a little album, or if you want to flip through them, you may want to kind of put some kind of a sealant on them, or, you know, plastic tape. But these are just supposed to be fun and experimental. And so that's just an example of one there. Some of these ones we just did are almost dry. The beauty of working on watercolor that's still wet is you can kind of go over top of it. So I didn't love that green up here, and I'm just gonna play and see, do I love it more with this color? I do, and I really like that texture. So I just took one of these water-soluble crayons, and I'm just sort of playing. And then maybe I want to make like orange marks in here. I like that a lot, those orange marks. And maybe I want to see how these reds look together. So that's more of a pretty pinkish red up here. I'm going to smudge it with my finger just to kind of get the edge of the card. And when you smudge it, again, it's not going to be as tacky. But I think for these cards, after doing this with you all today, my recommendation is to stick with maybe permanent markers, wax crayons, permanent pens, pencils, highlighters. I think, you know, these are just so tacky. They're fun, but it's not like you could really stack them without them sticking together very well. So I would probably use these in a different way. And just set those aside. Just gonna clean my hands. So it's really just about looking at what you have around and experimenting. So these ones that we just did, I'm going to see. The beauty of these watercolor crayons, these Stabilo Woodies, this is dry already, and it's really a lovely thing to work with. Kids love working with these crayons because they're so chunky. Like I said, they last and last and last. So my thought would be, if you're going to invest in like a mixed media supply, having you know, a pencil, a ballpoint pen in black, and maybe a higher quality water soluble. You can get pencil crayons, or, you know, these Stabilo crayons are awesome. So if I was to, this is kind of calling my name. This one's kind of calling my name. I really want to add in a little bit of pink. Maybe there's a gold one here. And I can blend them if I decide I don't like the color I'm using. Oops. I can add water or not. So this one, I just decided to go for more of a watercolor look. These are also great if you're traveling and you're traveling with your kids. It's like watercolor in a stick, right? I'm just gonna activate some of that gold, just see what happens. Maybe drop a little of the gold on the paintbrush down below here, blend it. I'm liking that piece. And then maybe we'll flip over to this card. We can use this blue highlighter that I had sitting around. And that's so pretty. I probably don't want to touch it down to the wax crayon because it won't work anymore, I'm sure, if I do that. But I just really like those highlighter marks in here. Suppose we could add a little bit of yellow, just a touch, not too much. Maybe write in like a word in here, but kind of like, so it's touching both sides. So it's not super legible. I'm gonna write the word create. I'll write create, and I'll put daily, just so I know what it says, but it's kind of an artsy looking card. Maybe I'll do some little X marks, almost like little stitch marks, tiny little X's. So a principle of art is line. And so adding little lines, big lines, painted lines. And maybe we can use some pencil in here. So I would do, sometimes I like to do sort of like, almost like kind of drawing like loops or leaves, or kind of just adding in pencil mark almost to frame the edge here, just to have the eye move around. So not thinking about really perfection, just the enjoyment of what you're doing. Think of it as like a little study and exploration, and, you know, a reminder of, oh, you know, I remember what I was up to that day. I remember how I felt. I know that I really like the idea of almost like a watercolor line landscape, the little X's. And so just using some supplies that are, you know, fairly affordable. And you have just this background, and if you have like a good felt pen, I don't happen to have, just see if I have a good felt pen or a good crayon, a good permanent pen. I could go back to this black crayon and just maybe write the word, what do I want to say? Maybe calm. I'm pushing down really hard. And so all this is a background of, say, your favorite color and a written word over top. If you have, again, some affordable white paint or dollar store paint, it doesn't have to be white. Let's just see. This is Citron Green Deco Art. I'm going to use my same Crayola round brush, and I'm just going to put maybe some acrylic paint on the side here. You can make your own watercolor of from watered down acrylic paint, right? So that looks more of a yellow. That's okay. I'm gonna just set that there. Maybe I'll add that same Citron Green acrylic paint over the highlighter, and ooh, I really like how that bright part turned out next to the acrylic. It's almost like they activated each other. That looks kind of neat. So keeping in mind, you want to repeat elements of what you're doing that you thought, oh, I like that. And then if you did something where you're like, oh, I don't know how much I like that, you may not want to repeat it right away. So all about kind of learning what you love. If I've done something that I don't really care for, I would take some paint, or, you know, let's just see. You always want to shake up these cheaper paints. So, but you know, say there is a color on here. Oh, I just took off some color there with my finger. So I'm just going to go over it with some of my favorite paint color right here. And then maybe just to move the eye up here, I'll do a little bit up there. And I really, really like that. And then since I like that color, maybe I can add it to the A in calm and this area between the lines of the letter, just for fun. Maybe I want to add it on there, maybe not. maybe on this one, I just want to practice mark making with this brush. And almost make like a collage background. And I think I'm liking this card more now that I've added this acrylic paint, so it's kind of fun. And I'm playing around with the amount of paint on my brush and keeping variety in the shape and just not overthinking it. So the beauty of working in quantity on multiples, oh, there's my timer. The beauty in working in multiples is that you don't get too caught up working on one thing. So I'm just gonna let those dry just a sec. Okay, and I'm coming back. I was just turning off my timer. So hopefully this video, I'm not going to zoom out or in just so I don't turn it off, but I really hope that you got something out of this. I'm really working on trying to keep my videos so they're inspirational, and I love your feedback. If you put your feedback under the comments, whether it's constructive or not, well, I prefer constructive, obviously. I really like to have those comments, and that helps my video get seen. So thank you for everybody who has commented. And you can see right now I'm kind of like just tuning out and getting some color off of my brush and just playing. And just gonna set these here. Very interesting today how this piece has dried with these Crayola watercolors, and I have never seen these little dots like that, so that's very interesting. And it gives me a really good base to, you know, journal on top of this, or again, cut this up and glue it on the back of these cards, or maybe over top of a little study that I just didn't like as much. There's so many things that you can do. So thank you so much for sticking with me. And I'm just gonna clean my brush on the back of this Crayola cardboard. Usually I create another painting on a blank piece of paper. You really want to get the paint out of your brush and onto, you know, something like a background. You're going to do these little cards. Actually, it is what would have been a good idea was to clean my brush on one of these cards. So I'm just going to get it a bit wet and just get the rest of that acrylic out on here. And I'm just going to clean my brush there. There's quite a bit, I think, that I'm going to link in this video for you. And don't hesitate to reach out if there's something that I missed. And you will just love, like I said, the other thing right now, I'm looking at all of these cut up paintings. So paintings that I may have started that just didn't amount to anything, but making little cards and using these as little studies, little backgrounds. So again, putting a word over top, you know, maybe doing some mark making that you love. If you purchased a new permanent pen, say, you know, just trying to see what it looks like over top of whatever the medium was that you had used. So, you know, considering if you have some paintings that were done on paper that you just weren't feeling, I tend to use a lot of mixed media, so a lot of layers, to the point where sometimes I'm a bit stuck and I'd rather cut it up and use it as collage. That's what these are for. Sometimes I cut my painting down just to the focal point that I love, but you know, just looking at these cut up paintings just reminds me of how I've already kind of broken that blank page. I don't have that white page staring at me, and it gives me something to run with. Gives me new ideas. It reminds me, oh, I love that dark turquoise. So it's all about play. The more that you do this and you just turn off the judgment and you experiment. So, you know, say if something didn't turn out great, painting over it. Like I said, I often use a higher quality. This isn't exactly a high quality, but you know, what I have on hand is this golden titanium white, super high quality fluid paint. I use this often if I've done a piece on watercolor and I don't love it, or in some of my paintings, my style is to almost use this as like a whiteout, and I will use this to go over an area I don't like, and I'll wait till it dries and then I'll do mark making over top. So, you know, you don't need to have golden paint. This is very expensive, but getting like, say, the DecoArt Americana brand in the titanium white. White is a really good way to almost edit your work when you have put down, say, something, a color, a pattern that you don't love. Instead of walking away or tearing it up or, you know, abandoning it, you can, you know, add a bit of white over top. So just as an example, I'm just trying to see, I don't really like what's going on in here at all, but I love this dark purple up here, and I love this. Just not a fan of what's going on through here. So I'm just gonna pour a little of the titanium white into the lid, and, you know, or getting a paint color that you just love. White's good because it's neutral, got a bit too much. And then I'm just going to, because it's high quality, you can see it's really pigmented. I'm just gonna kind of run it over almost like a watercolor cloud until I start to like the painting better, this mini painting. So I'm still not loving it, but now I can go back and wait till it dries and do some mark making over top, maybe put a different color over top. Just to note that the white does sometimes pick up the watercolor, especially if it's not fully dry. And for this one, maybe I just want to do a few little white marks next to the peach. So again, if you're working on multiple at a time, you're just not getting stuck. So I already like that better. Remembering that art is all about layers. So, you know, I feel like the more layers you can add, the more interesting the art can be. And that includes watercolor. You can layer your watercolors. So after they dry, going back and adding new layers over top. Right now, I'm just kind of cleaning up the edges here with this white, just because I have a lot on my brush. And I'm just creating more interest in these little paintings. I like this one, this is cute. See how that white's a bit transparent over top of that citron green? Just adding it as a bit of a neutral. And not judging what I'm doing, because I'm just doing this as, you know, a fun, explorative, you know, kind of playful exercise where I'm learning about what brush I like to hold, what affordable paints do I like and which really would I not use, what techniques do I want to maybe do with my kids or my grandkids or a friend. Sorry, I just got paint on my phone. And I'm gonna just leave it there, and I really appreciate you sticking with me, and thank you so much. I can't wait to hear about your creations, and I will just do my best to link everything in the video. Okay, take care, see you soon.